I was erased from my son's wedding by my ex-wife. No name, no seat. But when they opened the box I left behind, they realized I didn't need a seat to destroy them. The late May air carried the fresh scent of spring through the open doors of the luxurious wedding hall in downtown New York. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering crowd, while melodic jazz filled the space. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except me. I stood alone near the entrance, adjusting my well-worn but meticulously pressed tie. The same tie I'd worn to Ryan's college graduation, back when he still looked me in the eye. 52 years old, and here I was, Arthur Blake, father of the groom, feeling like an intruder at my own son's wedding. A wedding at a venue I had helped Ryan scout months before. Clara stepped in and refined our choices. I spotted Ryan across the room, confident in his tailored tuxedo, moving with the self-assured grace that came from his success at the architectural firm, 28 years old, and already a partner. I'd like to think he got his drive from me, but he hasn't acknowledged getting anything from me in years. Not since Clara poisoned that well. Speaking of Clara, my ex-wife glided through the crowd like she owned the place, her elegant cream dress complementing her calculated charm. She'd perfected the role of the doting mother touching Ryan's arm, laughing with his friends, playing the character she'd been rehearsing since our divorce 15 years ago. Victor Hale, her new husband of 12 years, trailed behind her like a well-trained shadow. Steel-eyed and polished with the kind of confident smile that came from old money and sharp elbows. The kind of man who never had to wonder if he belonged somewhere. My daughter Sophie caught my eye from across the room before quickly looking away. At 25, she'd mastered the art of keeping neutral territory between her parents, though tonight her diplomatic skills seemed strained. She'd hugged me briefly when I arrived, then quickly disappeared into the safety of the crowd. I might as well have been invisible. The other guests, mostly Victor's business associates and Clara's social circle, occasionally glanced my way with puzzled expressions. I overheard snippets of their whispers. "Who's that man standing alone? I think he's related to the groom somehow. Why isn't he mingling with anyone?" Even the waitstaff seemed to have been instructed on who mattered tonight. They offered champagne and hors d'oeuvres to everyone, but somehow never quite made it to my corner. When the MC announced it was time to be seated for dinner, I approached the head table looking for my place card. Clara had arranged everything meticulously. Her name, Victor's name, her sister, Diane's name. They'd even placed a ridiculous reserved sign for Clara's Pomeranian Max, who apparently deserved acknowledgement more than I did. No Arthur Blake nowhere. I glanced at Ryan, catching his eye for the first time that evening. He held my gaze for only a moment before looking away, uncomfortable but not surprised. That's when I knew this wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. I approached him, keeping my voice low. "Seems you forgot someone at the table arrangements." Ryan adjusted his tie, eyes fixed on something across the room. "Dad, you've always preferred staying out of the spotlight. Didn't think that needed to change tonight." His words cut through me like ice. 15 years of child support, of showing up to every game and recital. Even when Clara made it hell, of helping with college applications and first apartment deposits, all reduced to being conveniently forgettable. I didn't argue I wouldn't beg for a seat at my own son's wedding like some pitiful charity case. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small wooden box I'd brought with me. My insurance policy against being completely erased. I placed it directly in front of Ryan. His eyes flickered with confusion, and the first hint of uneasiness I'd seen all night. "What's this?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the music. I didn't answer. A few nearby guests had noticed our exchange, their curiosity piqued by this unexpected deviation from the perfect wedding script. Clara approached quickly, her smile faltering as she spotted the box. She opened her mouth to speak, but I turned away before she could say anything, denying her the satisfaction of having the last word. As I walked toward the exit, the band played on, and guests continued raising their glasses in celebration. But for me, the party was over before it had begun. The glass doors closed behind me with a soft click. Inside, I heard the MC's voice ring out. "And now I'd like to invite the people closest to Ryan Blake to say a few words." I no longer needed to be called by name. Let them open that box. Let them finally see who I really am and what I'm capable of when pushed too far. I drove my old sedan through the empty streets of New York, streetlights streaking past like scratches across my memories. The wedding venue disappeared in my rearview mirror, but the humiliation remained burning in my chest. 15 years of being diminished, and tonight was the final blow, erased completely from my own son's wedding. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since I left. Ryan called first. Then Clara with her razor-sharp text messages demanding to know what game I was playing. Sophie's message was shorter, but hit harder. "Dad, what is this about?" I ignored them all. For the first time in 15 years, my silence carried real weight. Each vibration of my phone was confirmation that the box had begun to work its magic. Let them squirm. Let them wonder. At a red light, I looked down at my calloused hands gripping the steering wheel. These same hands had worked second and third jobs to pay for Ryan's college tuition, after Clara took almost everything in the divorce. These hands had fixed Sophie's car countless times without ever mentioning it, because that's what fathers do. I remembered the day Clara casually announced she was leaving me for Victor, as if informing me about a change in dinner plans. "Victor understands my ambitions," she'd said, as though my decades of supporting her dreams had been invisible. "We'll make this easy on the kids." Easy for whom I'd been naive enough to think that giving her most of our assets would keep the peace, would ensure I remained part of my children's lives. I signed away our house, our savings, most of our investments, all to protect Ryan and Sophie from a messy divorce. But Clara didn't just take my money. She methodically destroyed my image in my children's eyes. Small comments at first. "Your father was always so absent-minded about your games," or "Your dad never could handle responsibility well." Lies that grew more convincing with repetition, especially when reinforced by the charming, successful Victor. By the time the kids were in college, they'd accepted a version of me that never existed, a peripheral figure who didn't quite deserve center stage in their lives. The box I'd left behind contained the receipts, literal and figurative, of that systematic erasure I'd compiled everything over the years. Tuition payments, car repair bills, rent supplements I'd sent anonymously when Ryan struggled after graduation. There was the $20,000 check from Clara, with "For your continued discretion" scrawled in the memo line. Her payoff after I discovered her affair had started years before she admitted it. I'd included the email Clara had accidentally sent to my address, instead of Victor's, discussing strategies to minimize Arthur's influence over the children. But the most damning piece of evidence was a letter Ryan had written to me when he was 14, just after the divorce. "Dad, I don't care what Mom says, I want to live with you." A letter Clara intercepted and hid, but that eventually found its way back to me through a sympathetic family friend. The only proof that at one point my son had chosen me. When I arrived home, I went straight to my safe. Something felt wrong. The secondary file, the one containing evidence of Victor's financial fraud that I'd gathered over the years, was missing. I never put it in the box. It was too dangerous, too explosive for a wedding surprise. Someone had been in my house. In my safe, I checked the security system and found it had been disabled 3 days ago. My mind raced through recent visitors. Sophie had stopped by last week to borrow some old family photos. Had she been sent to scout, or was it someone else entirely? I sat in the darkness of my living room, my phone still buzzing occasionally with messages I wouldn't answer. I knew Clara and Victor well enough to know they wouldn't stop at psychological manipulation. They had prepared for every contingency. What they didn't anticipate was that I had done the same. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a backup USB drive, a duplicate of all the evidence I'd carefully preserved over the years. When I plugged it into my laptop, I noticed something strange, an unfamiliar file I didn't remember creating. As the file opened, a name appeared on the screen that made my blood run cold. Sophie Recordings. Morning light was streaming through my kitchen window when the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to find Sophie standing there, her face drawn with exhaustion, eyes still flashing with anger beneath her disheveled hair. "What were you trying to accomplish with that box, Dad?" she demanded, not bothering with a greeting. Her voice carried the same sharp edge I'd heard from Clara countless times during our final years together. Instead of answering, I met her gaze directly. "Have you opened it yet?" She faltered, her composure cracking slightly. The answer was clear. She hadn't. Whatever Ryan or Clara had told her about the box's contents, curiosity had brought her here before confirming it herself. "Ryan asked me to come get it," she finally admitted. "Why didn't he come himself?" Sophie's jaw tightened. He's busy dealing with the fallout from his ruined wedding reception. The reception wasn't ruined, I said flatly. I was the only one who left. After a tense silence, Sophie reluctantly accepted the wooden box I retrieved from my office. She held it gingerly, as if it might explode, suspicion clouding her eyes as she turned to leave. "Sophie," I called after her. "When you see what's inside, just remember there are always two sides to every story." She didn't respond, just walked to her car without looking back. I spent the day in a strange state of calm anticipation, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. My phone remained silent for the first time in 24 hours. No more desperate calls or angry texts. I knew the silence wouldn't last. It was after 9 that evening when Sophie returned. One look at her face told me everything. This was not the same woman who had stormed into my house that morning. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched Ryan's letter, the one he'd written at 14. "Why did you keep this hidden for 11 years? Her voice cracked as she asked the question, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I gestured for her to sit on the couch, then took the chair across from her. "Because I learned a long time ago that nobody wants to hear the truth when they're living comfortably with lies." Sophie unfolded the letter, reading aloud, her brother's childish handwriting. "Dad, I don't care what Mom says, I want to live with you. Please don't let her take us away." He actually wrote this. "A week after your mother announced she was leaving. He gave it to me when I picked him up for the weekend. By Monday, he wouldn't look me in the eye. Your mother made sure of that." For the next hour, I walked Sophie through the evidence I'd compiled. The tuition payments Clara had claimed were her sacrifices. The visiting days mysteriously canceled. The way I'd stand across the street from their school events when Clara convinced the administration I shouldn't be allowed inside due to concerning behavior. "Mom and Victor always told us you were a burden," Sophie admitted quietly. "That all you did was complain about child support and try to make us feel guilty. And you believed them. We were kids, Dad, and they were convincing." She hesitated. "But sometimes things didn't add up. Like when Mom said you never came to my swim meets, but Aunt Judith mentioned seeing you there." As Sophie reached the bottom of the box, her fingers found something unexpected, a USB drive wedged into a hidden compartment. "That's not mine," I said, immediately alert. "I didn't put that there." Sophie's eyes widened. "Then who did?" We plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained a single audio file time-stamped just 3 weeks earlier. The voices of Clara and Victor filled my living room, discussing their plans for Ryan with chilling detachment. "Once he makes partner, we'll have access to their client list." Clara's voice purred, "Ryan just needs to follow instructions and we'll handle the rest." "What if he pushes back?" Victor asked. "He won't." Clara replied coldly, "Ryan's always been eager to please, unlike Sophie, who asks too many questions." The most disturbing moment came near the end, when a third male voice joined the conversation. Someone neither Sophie nor I recognized. "Proceed as planned." The voice instructed, "Arthur Blake will no longer be a concern." Sophie and I sat in stunned silence after the recording ended. "There's someone else involved?" I finally said, "Victor isn't calling the shots." Sophie nodded slowly. "Mom's been taking private calls lately. I overheard her once referring to someone as the boss. I thought she was talking about her new job." Pieces started clicking into place. The missing file on Victor's financial fraud, the disabled security system. Whoever was behind this had been planning something bigger than just isolating me from my children. "You can't tell Ryan about this yet." I warned Sophie. "We need to be careful. He needs to know." She insisted. "They've been using him. Using his reputation." I agree, but we need to be sure which side Ryan's on before we show our hand. Sophie reluctantly agreed. As she prepared to leave, she turned back at the door, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I think I know who the man on the recording is, but if I'm right, this is way more dangerous than we thought." I watched my daughter's silhouette disappear into the night, a growing sense of foreboding settling over me. Whatever war I'd started by leaving that box, it was clearly about to extend far beyond a family dispute. We were stepping into something much darker, something that had been operating in the shadows for years. and someone out there had already decided I was a problem that needed to be eliminated. A week passed like a slow-burning fuse. Sophie arranged for Ryan to come to my house under the pretense of a family discussion. I spent the morning preparing myself for every possible reaction from my son: denial, anger, even hatred. When Ryan arrived, his face was a mask of cold indifference. He stood in my living room like a stranger, maintaining a careful distance as if proximity might contaminate him. "I don't appreciate being ambushed," he said, glancing between Sophie and me. Sophie didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You need to see this," she said, placing the USB drive and his childhood letter in his hands. "All of it." I watched my son's face as he read his own 14-year-old handwriting, saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. When we played the recording, his complexion gradually paled. His mother's voice filled the room, clinical and calculating as she discussed using his professional connections. "Ryan just needs to follow instructions." Clara's recorded voice echoed through my living room. When the third voice appeared at the end of the recording, the unknown man giving orders about me, Ryan's jaw tightened visibly. "This could be anything," he finally said, voice strained. "Business discussions get aggressive sometimes. You're twisting this into something sinister." "Business." I slammed my hand on the coffee table. "How many excuses are you going to make for their betrayal? They're using you, Ryan. They always have been." "You don't understand how things work in my world," Ryan shot back. "Sometimes lines get blurred. The only thing blurred is your judgment." Sophie interrupted. "Look at this." She spread out copies of contracts bearing Ryan's name as a consultant on deals he'd never personally reviewed. "Victor put your name on these without your knowledge. If these deals go south, you're legally implicated." Ryan fell silent, staring at the papers. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at me. "How long have you known about all this?" "Longer than you've believed Victor was the ideal man you should emulate," I replied quietly. Ryan sat motionless, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling visibly. "What do we do now?" He finally asked, his voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. I outlined the plan I'd developed with Thomas Reed, my attorney, and the only person I fully trusted outside this room. "First, we gather every piece of evidence of Victor's financial fraud and your mother's complicity. Then we use media pressure to force them into the open. Most importantly, we ensure you're publicly distanced from any legal implications." Ryan hesitated, still wrestling with the remnants of his loyalty to Clara and Victor. Sophie leaned forward. "Do you want to be their puppet for the rest of your life? Is that the man you want to be?" Something hardened in Ryan's eyes, then a resolve I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He nodded once firmly. 2 days later, I arranged a meeting at Thomas Reed's office. When Clara and Victor arrived, their confidence was palpable. Clara maintained her composure, while Victor's expression bordered on amusement, as if this were a minor inconvenience in his day. I wasted no time. I tossed the file and USB drive onto Thomas's mahogany desk. "Wire fraud, tax evasion, using Ryan's name without consent on legally binding documents," I said, ticking off each offense. "And conspiracy to commit whatever the hell you two were planning with your mystery boss." Victor's laugh was dismissive. "Is this amateur hour, Arthur?" He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You think I wouldn't have my own cards to play?" He spread the contents across the desk: records of cash loans I'd taken years ago to make child support payments, documentation of unreported income from side jobs I'd worked to help pay for the kids' expenses, 15 years of tax violations. Victor said, smirking, "Enough to put you away for quite some time." I allowed myself a slow smile. "You think I'd let you hold that over me? Those accounts were legally settled 2 months ago. Full disclosure, full payment of back taxes, approved payment plan for penalties. You're holding expired ammunition. Victor." The confidence drained from Victor's face. Clara leaned over, whispering something in his ear, but I caught a single phrase. "Call him now." "If you're calling someone," I interrupted, "make sure they can save you from the FBI, because tonight all of this goes to them." Victor's composure cracked entirely. His laughter turned harsh, desperate. "Arthur, you have no idea who you're messing with. The man behind me isn't someone you can cross and walk away from unscathed." "Is that a threat?" Thomas interjected. Victor stood gathering his useless papers. It's a fact of life. Counselor Arthur here is poking a bear he doesn't even know exists. Clara followed him to the door, her face a mixture of fury and fear. Before leaving, she turned back. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake I made was letting you erase me from my children's lives," I replied evenly. "That ends today." As the door closed behind them, Thomas turned to me, his expression grave. "Arthur, I just received information from my contact at the SEC. Victor's company is just a shell. The real power behind it is one of the most influential financial titans on the East Coast." I allowed myself a grim smile. Then it's time to show him I'm not just a shadow anymore. 3 days after our confrontation with Clara and Victor, Thomas called with news that confirmed our suspicions. "Arthur, it's Gregory Maddox." His voice was tense even over the phone. "My contact at the SEC confirmed it. Maddox is the puppet master behind Victor's entire operation." The name hit me like a physical blow. Gregory Maddox, a financial titan whose reputation bordered on mythical. His official portfolio included luxury real estate developments and tech investments, but rumors had circulated for years about his more shadowy enterprises. How deep are his connections? I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Deep enough to have 3 federal investigations mysteriously shut down in the past decade," Thomas replied. "He's got judges in his pocket, politicians on his payroll. Arthur, this man is practically untouchable through conventional channels." I sat back in my chair processing this information. Going after Maddox with just legal means would be like trying to drain the ocean with a teaspoon. We needed to hit him where it would actually hurt his reputation and power base. "We need someone on the inside," I said. "Finally, someone who knows where the bodies are buried." Thomas was silent for a moment. There might be someone. Daniel Cross, former CFO at Maddox Capital. He took the fall for a money laundering scheme 5 years ago. Did 3 years in a minimum security prison while Maddox walked away clean. It took us a week to locate Daniel Cross. He was living in a modest apartment in Philadelphia, working as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing company, a dramatic fall from his previous life of luxury. When we approached him, his initial reaction was fear. "I can't talk about Maddox," he said, his hands trembling as he poured himself a drink. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I think I'm starting to," I replied. "He's already threatened my family. He's been manipulating my son for years." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, recognition, perhaps even empathy. "Maddox destroys families. It's what he does best. He finds vulnerable points and exploits them." Over the next hour, Daniel slowly opened up. For the promise of protection and immunity arranged through Thomas's FBI contacts, he agreed to provide us with detailed records of Maddox's illegal operations, offshore accounts, shell companies, bribes to officials, all meticulously documented during his time as CFO. I kept these as insurance. Daniel explained, retrieving a hidden hard drive from behind a loose brick in his fireplace. "Never thought I'd actually use them." With Daniel's evidence in hand, we formulated a 3-pronged attack. First, we would deliver the most damning financial evidence to the FBI and select media outlets, ensuring that even if Maddox tried to squash the investigation, too many people would know about it. Second, Ryan would publicly come forward as a victim of manipulation, severing all ties with Victor and Maddox, while emphasizing that he had been an unwitting pawn in their schemes. Third, I would leverage my own experience to establish the Blake Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting parents alienated from their children through manipulation and legal maneuvering. We moved quickly, knowing that Maddox would retaliate as soon as he sensed trouble. I organized a press conference where Ryan, looking both determined and vulnerable, stood beside me at the podium. For years, I was manipulated by people I trusted. Ryan stated, his voice steady, despite the cameras flashing in his face. "Today, I'm officially severing all ties with Victor Hale and Gregory Maddox and cooperating fully with federal authorities in their investigation." We released the recorded conversation, the forged contracts bearing Ryan's name, and documents linking Maddox to dozens of similar schemes, families torn apart so he could control assets, reputations ruined to silence critics. The media erupted. Within hours, Maddoxgate was trending nationwide. Investigative journalists began connecting dots between Maddox and the mysterious bankruptcies of family-owned businesses that had refused his partnerships. Maddox's response came the very next morning, a handwritten note delivered to my doorstep. "You're playing with fire. Arthur Blake, I've erased men far more powerful than you." Thomas called. Hours later, alarmed. "Arthur, your personal accounts have been frozen. Maddox is pulling strings with his banking connections." I had anticipated this. "That's why I moved most of my assets last week. Let him think he's got me cornered." Our counterattack came from an unexpected direction. With Daniel's guidance, we exposed evidence of Maddox bribing a senior federal judge overseeing a major antitrust case, a scandal too significant for even Maddox's influence to suppress. The story exploded across international media, forcing the FBI to take visible, decisive action or risk appearing completely corrupted. The dominoes fell faster than even we had anticipated. Federal agents raided Maddox's mansion, leading him out in handcuffs, while news helicopters circled overhead. His assets were frozen, his empire crumbling by the hour as investors fled and partners distanced themselves. Victor Hale was arrested the following day, charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Clara's fate was less dramatic, but perhaps more fitting. Though she avoided significant jail time by cooperating with authorities, she lost everything: her social standing, her wealth, even her carefully cultivated image. The society that once embraced her now shunned her completely. Last I heard, she'd moved to a small town in the Midwest, living in anonymity. Ryan and Sophie emerged as sympathetic figures, victims of manipulation who had found the courage to stand against corruption. Public opinion rallied behind them, and slowly our family began to heal. The Blake Foundation became more than just a vehicle for our justice. It evolved into a powerful advocate for parental rights, particularly for fathers who had been systematically erased from their children's lives. After divorces, I found myself speaking at conferences, sharing my story with others who had been relegated to shadows in their children's lives. "You turned your pain into purpose," a fellow father told me after one such event. "You showed us that we don't have to accept being forgotten." 6 months after Maddox's arrest, I was leaving my final press conference when a reporter approached me, speaking quietly. "Mr. Blake, there are rumors that Gregory Maddox still has a secret account in Switzerland. Are you going to pursue this to the end?" I smiled slightly, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. "Not my concern anymore, but if he ever returns, I'll be the first one waiting." A year after the Maddox scandal broke, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. What began as a desperate act of defiance at my son's wedding had cascaded into a complete reconstruction of my family and my purpose. Ryan and Sophie now visited my home regularly, the awkwardness between us dissolving with each shared meal and honest conversation. The walls built over 15 years of manipulation were coming down one brick at a time. We didn't rush it. Some wounds needed time to heal properly. On a crisp spring morning, Ryan handed me an embossed invitation to the grand opening of his new architectural firm. "I'd be honored if you'd be there, Dad," he said, meeting my eyes without hesitation. "And not just as a guest, I'd like you to say a few words." When the day arrived, I stood beside my son on the stage, looking out at the gathered crowd of industry professionals and media. Ryan placed his hand on my shoulder and spoke into the microphone. "This is Arthur Blake," he said, "my father. The man who taught me what integrity and courage actually look like when everything is on the line." Those words healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still broken. The most unexpected joy came from my granddaughter, Lily, Sophie's 6-year-old daughter. Before all this, I'd been a peripheral figure in her life, the grandpa she saw on obligatory holidays who brought gifts but remained a stranger. Now I was Grandpa Arthur, who picked her up from school on Wednesdays and knew exactly how she liked her peanut butter sandwiches cut. At her school's art fair, Lily pulled me excitedly toward her display. "This one's for you, Grandpa." The drawing showed a tall figure, unmistakably me, with my gray hair standing protectively over smaller figures representing Sophie, Ryan, and Lily herself. Across the top, in careful first-grade printing, were the words, "My grandpa is the light in the dark." I knelt beside her, unable to speak for a moment. This was the legacy that mattered. Not vengeance or vindication, but love reclaimed and freely given. The Blake Foundation expanded beyond my wildest expectations, opening chapters in 12 states within 18 months. We provided legal support to hundreds of single fathers fighting biased custody arrangements, offered counseling services, and lobbied for family court reform. I received numerous invitations to enter politics, to run for local office, or join advocacy groups in Washington. I declined them all. I don't need power, I explained at a foundation fundraiser. I need recognition for those who have been forgotten. That's a different mission entirely. On a blustery autumn day, as golden leaves swirled outside the foundation's office windows, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Clara. She stood in my doorway, a shadow of her former self. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple, affordable attire. The polished confidence was gone, replaced by a haunted vulnerability. "Arthur," she began hesitantly, "I need help. Everyone has turned their backs on me. I have nothing left." Her voice cracked slightly. "We were family once." I studied her face, the face I had once loved, then hated, and now felt nothing but a distant pity for. "We were family." I agreed, meeting her gaze steadily. "Until you decided to sell it to the highest bidder." I walked past her toward the elevator, leaving her standing alone in the cold autumn wind that gusted through the open door. There was no satisfaction in her downfall, only the peaceful certainty that this chapter was finally completely closed. Early one morning, I stood on the balcony of the foundation's office, watching the flow of people below, businessmen and women hurrying to work, parents walking children to school, everyday lives unfolding in their own rhythms. I realized I was no longer searching for my place among them. I had created my own space that no one could take away. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Dad, Lily, and I will stop by for dinner tonight. She wants to hear your stories about how you fought back in the old days." I smiled already, planning what to cook. For the first time in many years, I felt peaceful pride fill my chest. The anger that had fueled me was gone, replaced by something stronger and more enduring. That evening, I opened my old journal and wrote a single line. "No one is born to be a shadow. If they push you into darkness, learn to become the light they cannot ignore." As I switched off the office lights and stepped into the twilight, I felt ready for whatever came next. The past was settled. The future was wide open. And for once, I walked forward, not bent with resentment, but standing tall with pride and freedom. A man who had once been invisible now cast his own light.